Well, I will just kick off with a little intro from me and then hand it to JoAnn for a little intro. We'll, if you have tech problems, I think Kate is your go-to person. So please hit her up. We'll take questions throughout. You can drop them in the chat. You can ask us whatever's going to work best for you. And then we will have some slides that we'll be putting up. So I'm Jen Simon. I am, along with JoAnn, co-founder of the Cowgirl Run Fund. I am class of 2005. We were not simply the best, but I still felt like I had to click that button, even though I knew it was 2012. Best class ever. But I'm also the founder of the Wyoming Women's Action Network, and I'm a senior policy advisor with the Equality State Policy Center. And a lot of my work is around gender and representation and women's leadership, particularly in Wyoming. So I was really excited to get the opportunity to work with JoAnn and Lisa and some other extraordinary women on Cowgirl Run Fund, which we're going to talk to you about today. So JoAnn, I'll hand it off to you for a second.
Wonderful. So I'm JoAnn True, and I am a petroleum geologist by education and profession. I am also heavily involved in the partisan side of politics, and as Jen mentioned, this group of women, we got together about a year ago and said, hey, I would sure like to see more women involved in politics and on boards, and how do we do this? So we thought, we'll just throw together a little pack and we'll see how we can get information into the hands of women and encourage them to think about running for office. So that is how we got to that point. And I know Jen is going to go through some details in our slides on the specifics of why, but that's kind of how we got the idea. And well, it just grew from there. So we started it. Our first event was the 10th of December to celebrate women's getting the right to vote, or I'm saying that wrong, the recognizing women's right to vote. So, and we have had a interesting year to say the least. So.
I think that is the text and the subtext of our conversation today is the interesting year that we've had. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll go through a few slides that give you a little bit of context about where things started and why it was so important to us. Censure and silver linings, and I'll talk about the context before I hand it back to JoAnn. So this is kind of what you need to know for the basic context for this conversation, is that in terms of the top 5, we are not ranking in the top 5. We rank in the bottom 5 for female representation. That's according to the Center for American Women in Politics, which is a fantastic nonpartisan research center focused on this. Just about 15.6% of the Wyoming legislature was women. We did see 2 more women elected this year, but given that it was a record year for women running for office and winning in other places, I'm not sure we can reasonably expect to see that ranking rise. And here's what it looks like over time, which I think is really important. As lots of folks will attest, we were not always in the bottom 5. In fact, for a number of years, we were in the top 5. We've had great conversations throughout Cowgirl Run Fund with folks like Cynthia Lummis, who was elected in that era when there were a number of women serving. And this line is helpful. We kept it on this chart because in 1992, there was a systemic structural shift. Prior to that, there were multi-member or multi-winner districts, which are actually in a lot of ways, that structure is more favorable to women getting elected. There are other places in the country that have brought those back and they've seen success. There are other things like ranked choice voting that has been really helpful in terms of getting more diverse representation, but you can see on this, we took a pretty precipitous dip and we haven't, except for one great blip in 2008, we haven't really bounced back up. We're down toward the bottom nationally. And so we started to talk about PACs, and it turns out there's a lot of disparity by gender in terms of how much money from PACs flows to men versus women. Nationally, this is obviously a national graph because in Wyoming, most PAC money flows to Republican candidates because we mostly have Republican candidates. Nationally, it's a pretty even split, but you can also see that men on both sides of the aisle get a lot more of those dollars than women do. So this becomes a really important part of what we thought we could do to influence the outcome, and the outcome being having more women represented at the policymaking table. And Represent Women, this national group, nonpartisan, makes some recommendations about what PACs can do to be helping women. So we really paid attention to some of those, set some targets, worked with organizations that recruited and trained women candidates, and really are incredibly invested in that. And again, the nonpartisan piece was really important to us. And you can see that in this. We did not ask any issues related questions. We were incredibly specific about that. We had a questionnaire that really got to these concepts. What's your history of supporting other women? What's your history of civic engagement? What's your campaign plan? And huge thanks to our bipartisan panel who interviewed every single applicant, which was extraordinary. Spent a lot of time, invested a lot of energy in making sure that we were endorsing candidates who did these things. We, again, I can't say it enough times, did not care where you stood on issues. What we wanted was a group of women who were invested in their communities, who were invested in the state of Wyoming, and who really had common values around that. And I would say that one of the things that was probably most heartening about what was a pretty challenging political season nationally and across the country was getting together with the women in the Cowgirl Run Fund, because you had these women who had very different, very different ideological perspectives, very different perspectives on issues or how to lead, but a very clear sense that they could and should be working together, and that was a leadership value that they held in common. And so I'm gonna hand it off to JoAnn now to sort of pick it up with, then we got noticed. So on the next slide, this is the beginning of the noticing.
So yeah, we started this out. We thought, oh, well, you know, we're just gonna ask around about some women, for some women to support us. We had a great selection committee. I see Rosie is on this call. We also had Catherine Boswell and Mary Throne, and then me. And one of the comments when we first started out with this, just how many Leadership Wyoming grads, just by happenstance, we had involved. And a lot of us, quite frankly, knew each other through Leadership Wyoming, so there's a plug. But we started out, we had these great intents, and we were gonna get training to women, and we were PACs, we were gonna get money in the hands of women, and so we put together our materials, and then we sort of said, okay, well, I guess we need to get out there and make it known that this is what we're doing. So it had some really great press, and thought, oh, we're doing great things, and people are gonna do nothing but appreciate our efforts, right? So then I told Vandy that I would be incredibly cautious about the fact that Leadership Wyoming is a 501c3, and we are not to venture into the politics side of anything, but I am on the state GOP committee as the Natrona County State Committee woman. So I'll just say this about the state GOP. It's a bit dysfunctional right now, and I'll leave it at that. But I didn't think that there was going to be a great appreciation from that group about what I was doing, but I also didn't expect this. So I was censured, first woman in the state of Wyoming that anyone can find record of to be censured. And very quickly, and this is where we're going to go into lessons learned, people stepped up and supported me, and supported the PAC, and supported Jen, and supported everyone who was involved. And so for those of you who did that, for those of you who reached out, and for those of you who willingly put themselves out there to support our efforts, I really want to thank you for all of that. So we're going to go through a little bit on lessons learned on leadership, etc. And then we told Mandy that we would then open it up for questions about the PAC, and about what we've learned, and where we're going to go from there. So if you have any questions, we'll get to those in a minute. But our lessons learned, leadership is not always fun. As Jen mentioned, we didn't kind of know what this was going to look like. We just thought, oh, well, we'll just start a PAC and we'll get money in the hands of women. And then especially those who had experience with running campaigns and had been heavily involved in political campaigns, theirs and others, they said, well, hold up, here's all these restrictions about PACs and how to structure them, and how do you want to do this, and how do you want to select things. And so we did an inordinate amount of back-end work, which was great, but it was like a full-time job some weeks, which Jen can attest to. And we leaned really heavily. I saw Ryan was on this call as well. Ryan McConaughey was a very, very helpful person in all of this as well, because he was really gracious with his time and gave some great marketing info. So another Leadership Wyoming grad, shout out there. But yeah, leadership is not always fun. It can be tedious, it can be time consuming, and certainly when people are coming after you, you find out that not everyone appreciates what you're doing. So the old adage of you can't make all of the people happy all of the time. When all of this started to when it started hitting the press after the censure, I quite frankly was really surprised where support was coming from. We got support from places that I least expected it. There were people who reached out to me that literally said, I don't agree with what you're doing. I don't agree with the PAC, but I know that you're doing it with good intent. And so, I learned really quickly to accept however that support was coming in, even with caveats. And I thought that was really helpful. I know that others who were involved in it as well, got some negative press as well. And so I was surprised where support was coming in from. Keep your head in the game. One of our founding board members, I do remember about 2 weeks into all of the media play, I showed up in her office and just for some routine, to drop some checks off and stuff. And, she just said, like, you look terrible. And I said, I feel terrible. This is not fun to be out here and being vilified for something I think we're doing with great intent and I think needs to be done. And so she said, great, take 30 minutes, cry, scream, get mad, be upset. But then get back out there, like get back on that horse. And so I think for leadership, I think it's that you always have to be strong and you can't ever kind of recognize the fact that we're all human. And it quite frankly hurts when people say just really incredibly mean things to me in the press, in person, about my family, about what we're trying to do. And just to hear those targeted things, it is rough. So, it's okay to step back. It's okay to find those folks who are going to be supportive of you, but then, get back in there. So, and then the next slide. And I found this as well. I have watched this happen to others, and I have just sort of said, well, gosh, that's bad. That sounds bad. I feel bad for them that that's happening. But then I didn't actually do anything. And when I was in the middle of this, and when the Cowgirl Run Fund was in the middle of this, I really appreciated people stepping up, especially on the social media front and in the press, and stepping out and saying, like, this is not okay. This doesn't involve me. I may not agree 100%, or I may not, this is not something I support, but these are people I know. We all live here. It's a small state. And, I appreciated those folks stepping forward. So I have challenged myself to do this for others when I'm not in the line of fire, to get out there and support the ones who are taking the arrows. It really does make a huge difference. You don't have to do it publicly, but even personally, just reaching out, it does really help. And this is one of my favorites and Jen's as well. Negative press is not always bad. It can be a boon for fundraising. I will say that we had great support prior. People appreciated what we were doing, and people firmly believed in what we were doing. But I will tell you that getting censured and all of that hitting, and people saying, whoa, wait a minute, like, this is not okay. How do I donate to you? We had to do a lot of thank you writing this last few months, and that has been a great thing. So it sure brought attention to what we're doing. We've had people come out and say, how can I help you? How can I help with the training? I want to be involved. And by the way, here's some money. So it's no fun. Negative press is tough, but you know, you just need to learn how to navigate that and how to pivot. So here's another one. We thought we knew what we were doing when we started, and we had great intentions, and then it very quickly turned from what we thought we were going to be doing into what it turned into. So we had incredible constructive criticism from folks. And then on the PAC side of things, as Jen said, we did a lot of interviews, and you know, we'll talk about kind of our numbers after this, but you know, one of our selection committee folks said, you know, when we got done, well, this isn't going to be like everybody gets a gold star, right? We're not doing that, right? Like, we actually want to be out here and get women ready to run for office and get them trained up, right? Like, we're not just, this isn't a feel good thing. And so we tried to be the giver of constructive criticism. No one wants to hear like, oh, you're doing great. And then you get out there and you're like, I wasn't doing great. Like, why didn't you tell me that I needed help with X, Y, or Z? So we were really, we were willing to be the recipient of constructive criticism, and then we really tried to do the same for candidates. I think it's something that everyone kind of needs to work on. I'm not good at it, and I have to challenge myself, because it's easier to just say, oh, no, things are fine, like, you're doing great, where really it's not helpful. And then I'll throw the last in, you know, we're in Wyoming, code of the West. So through all of this, from the start to all of the heat we took to now, the mantra that I keep turning to is do what needs to be done. This needs to be done. You know, I am a woman in a male-dominated industry. I've had really good luck in that industry, but I have over the years tried to get more girls and women involved in science and industry and in petroleum geology, and didn't take any flack for that. Apparently it's okay to encourage women to do that, but just really needing to encourage women in places that we aren't predominantly in. And you know, my final parting comment on that was, boy, I got a whole lot of flack about being a misogynist. And I was like, you know, I'm a woman and I know the issues I face. And so, you know, I know what women I can help with if, you know, I mean, we need more people involved in the process anyway, but I can speak to this because I am a woman. So, and I think that's all I've got. Jen, do you have any final comments before we open it up?
I just want to add a couple of things. I want to say first that JoAnn is being incredibly modest on some level when she says we took fire or we were under, you know, attack or got a lot of criticism. I feel like you took those arrows for us. And I, for one, am incredibly grateful and always will be. Also modest about how much money washed over the transom as a result of that, because it really did, like, we had a pretty solid stretch where I was the person with the do what needs to be done attitude about like, check the email, check the email, check the email. And it was just a pretty constant stream of emails. And I know Brooke got letters to send to JoAnn, like lots of really tangible support that was just incredible. And I think speaks to the nature of Wyoming and community. And I think the other thing that I would add as we head into the chat is that we spend a lot of time right now, especially in political space, vilifying each other and demonizing each other across labels and parties. And I think that whatever we can do, and you know, if Cowgirl Run Fund did a tiny little bit in this direction, then I'm thrilled and we were successful. To start to say, no, like we have to put our communities first. We need to put Wyoming first. We really do share values, even if we don't necessarily agree on the policy decisions that'll get us there. And so how can we figure out how to have relationships that will help move that forward? And I feel like for all of us who were involved and everybody we got to meet and who supported us, that was really the unifying feature. And I think that, that's really ultimately going to be one of the things that helps our state through the pandemic, through the minerals decline, through our fiscal crisis. And that if we don't start to exhibit more of that kind of leadership, we're really, really in a tougher spot than we have to be. So I would add that. And I know that there are questions in the chat that I have not been attending to.